Good evening. It's 8 p.m. local time here in the Polish capital, Warsaw. You're watching World News Tonight, and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. Tonight, we'll be taking a close look at the protest that broke out in Georgia's capital, Tbilisi, in response to the victory of the pro-Russian Georgian Dream Party in elections on Saturday. Later in the program, we'll be joined by our correspondent on the ground and discuss the election results and current situation in Georgia with our guest Alex Crevo-Asantiani, Deputy Director for Foreign Affairs at the United National Movement. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Bulgaria's center-right leads in parliamentary elections but falls short of a majority needed to end political gridlock. NATO confirms North Korean troops have been deployed to Russia to fight against Ukraine. This time, it's not Robert Lewandowski but Eva Pajor that can make FC Barcelona proud. A big anti-government protest took place outside the Georgian parliament in Tbilisi today. The pro-European opposition believes that Saturday's parliamentary elections were stolen by the ruling pro-Russian party and say they will demand a repeat of the vote. Let's go live to our correspondent Ovidiusz Nicieja in Tbilisi. Good evening, Ovidiusz. So tell us what is happening in the Georgian capital as of now.
So the protest has finished recently. What we saw here was the first big protest following Saturday's parliamentary election here in Georgia. We saw here thousands of people who came here to protest against the government. It was here that the pro-European opposition announced that it would demand a rerun of the election, but this time under international supervision. Here we saw many different emotions. We saw here young people, we saw here the elderly, young children. It was a very big protest, and many people here were angered by the fact that they believe that the government stole this election. But many people were hopeful because so many people came to this protest. We saw even some had tears in their eyes as the anthems of the European Union and Georgia played. We spoke to some of the protesters who came here. Let's take a listen to what they told us.
This election was our last hope, but it was fully falsified, and it is really sad, and we are really disappointed.
The government take my voice, and we are just speechless right now because all this is happening because of the of our votes. Our votes are just taken.
And they basically stole the elections. I was observer at the elections. A lot of I actually live in US, but I came here to be observer because this is the time when we need to save our country, and we all are standing here to save our votes and not to accept the results of these elections.
Many people here told us that they will protest as long as it takes. However, at this point, it's not sure whether similar protests will take place tomorrow or in the coming days. People here, just like the opposition, want to wait, want to verify the allegations of fraud, and they want they seek solidarity from abroad in that matter.
Thank you very much. That was Ovidiusz Nicieja reporting from Tbilisi, Georgia. The European Union is expecting an investigation into reports of voting irregularities in Saturday's general election in Georgia. With protests rocking the country's capital, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has arrived in Tbilisi to congratulate the Georgian Dream Party on their victory. Jeremy Hołodniuk reports.
The election results in Georgia have drawn sharp criticism from the local opposition and international observers. Thousands gathered in Tbilisi, calling for the elections to be repeated. The EU has urged the country's authorities to investigate electoral law violations recorded during the elections.
We have made it clear that the EU expects the Georgian Central Election Commission and other relevant authorities to fulfill their duties. Those irregularities must be clarified and addressed.
Many Western leaders, including Polish President Andrzej Duda, shared that sentiment. Poland's foreign ministry has joined the voices of the opposition, emphasizing that numerous reports of violations cast doubt on the fairness of the elections.
We Poles, I think, simply sympathize with the Georgian nation and naturally would prefer this process to proceed in an orderly manner.
It comes as no surprise that the ruling pro-Russian Georgian Dream has recognized the results. The party, however, has reaffirmed that it had no plans of stepping away from Georgia's path toward the European Union.
We have very significant foreign policy priorities, and naturally the main one is European integration.
During an interview with TVP World, the country's pro-EU president Salome Zurabišvili said she had no doubt that Moscow meddled in the election.
What nobody was foreseeing was this sophistication, this massive, planned and very well planned in advance falsification, manipulation of the elections.
Questions have arisen over potential courses of action if the elections have indeed been rigged.
Georgian people, Georgian society and analysts are waiting for is the result and product of international organizations. What will be the product of their observation?
A Georgian election monitoring group, ISFED, has said that it registered a series of violations, including ballot stuffing, bribery and voter intimidation, all of which could have had an impact on the results.
The election outcomes cannot be considered a true reflection of the will of Georgian voters.
This, however, has not stopped Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban from visiting the country to personally congratulate the winners.
Viktor Orban is mainly coming here to legitimize the elections and he will try to utilize that he is now currently holding the EU presidency. Viktor Orban has his connections with the Georgian Dreams even years back.
Since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Georgia has been torn between the East and the West. While the majority of Georgians express willingness to break with Moscow's influence, some say the elections could be a step back from that goal. As calls for an investigation mount, the future of Georgia's European aspirations remains uncertain.
The late results are in, and it's clear the center-right GERB party has won the parliamentary elections in Bulgaria with 26.4% of the vote. But once again, that's not enough for GERB to rule on its own. Bulgarians cast their votes for the 7th time in just 4 years on Sunday, electing representatives from a total of 9 parties. Coalition talks are imminent, with all parties but one considered viable partners by GERB. Kazimierz Łysiak has this report.
Just by looking at his face at this press conference, it would be difficult to tell that this man's party had just won the Bulgarian parliamentary election. Former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov was hardly oozing optimism after his center-right GERB party got the largest number of votes on Sunday.
The number of parties in Parliament matters a lot, and I've always believed that the barrier for entry into Parliament should be raised, both for coalitions and parties. If all the parties enter into Parliament, from now on I know that there will not be a government.
The lack of smile on Borisov's face is perhaps reflective of the political deadlock which has marred the Balkan nation since 2020. After the 7th election in 4 years, GERB will try to finally form a stable government. With every failed attempt, however, the electorate's hope for stability fades.
I don't expect there to be a government, because there are some typical deals. We are seeing the same scenarios all over again.
And it will all come down to what deals will be made. GERB has to choose from between 8 other parties which got into parliament to try and form a ruling coalition. Its 2 best options are pro-Western We Continue the Change Democratic Bulgaria with 14.2% of the vote, or the Movement for Rights and Freedoms New Beginning, led by oligarch Delian Peevski, with 11.4%. The party, which came in third, the pro-Kremlin Revival, is out of the question for the GERB leader.
I congratulate them for their good showing, but purely from an ideological point of view, because of our connections in Europe, I cannot allow that.
Bulgaria, one of the few Balkan countries to be a member of the European Union, was meant to enter the Eurozone in the beginning of 2025. These plans are now put on hold, and experts point to a direct relation to the prolonged political crisis.
It is very much dependent on the internal political situation in Bulgaria, and that requires political stability. So if it will be achieved, definitely that might be an argument for the prompt membership in the Eurozone.
But this stability could still be a long way away. Many analysts are not convinced that GERB can form a stable coalition with the other parties.
These are one-issue parties. The leaders are typically, they don't have a clear agenda. They don't have a clear idea where they want to go. So it's highly unlikely.
With almost all votes tallied, GERB can count on more than 70 seats out of the 240 in the Bulgarian parliament. It needs at least 120 to be able to govern efficiently. The final distribution of seats should be clear by the end of the week.
Irregular migration has been a hot topic lately in capitals across Europe and within the European Union. Last year, Italy and Albania struck a deal that would see up to 3,000 migrants housed in Albania, while their asylum applications are fast-tracked in Italy. Some of the first asylum seekers this month were sent to the centers, only to be sent back to Italy a few days later. Now let's go to Don Arleth, who is in the port city of Shenzhen. Good evening, Don. So what can you tell us about this unorthodox approach by Italy, and why was it stopped?
Good evening. Excuse me. Yes. Well, Italy and Albania last year inked this deal costing Italy over a 5-year period about 670 million euro. And as you mentioned, they plan to house up to 3,000 migrants here at these two centers, one in Shenzhen, where I am, and the other in Gādar, which is about 20 kilometers away from here. So, yes, we saw about 2 weeks ago the first 16 men. Only men will be housed here, and only men that are picked up at sea, and of course they need to be adults. Women, children will all be left in Italy for those applications, these asylum applications, to be processed. So here, what they're trying to do is, like I said, fast-track the applications in Italy while they house them here in Albania. The first 16 men, 10 from Bangladesh and 6 from Egypt, showed up here 2 weeks ago. But they were only here for about a week before they were sent back. 4 of the men were actually minors, teenagers, I believe, that were still not adults. But the rest, the court in Rome actually called into question whether this whole process is legal. And the other issue was that the being from Bangladesh and from Egypt, well, according to the system in place in Italy, those countries are deemed unsafe, and therefore they needed to be returned to Italy just because of that. Now, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni fired back against the courts. She's having judiciary disputes, if you will. She wants to be able to make that determination, have her government make that determination as to whether those countries are safe or not. And that's a legal battle that'll happen in Italy. But here, I mean, obviously, this is an unorthodox approach. We've heard Ursula von der Leyen say that this is a innovative approach, actually, and something that should be explored. Austria, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Germany are also interested in making a similar deal with Albania. But for now, Albania is saying that this deal is exclusive only to Italy. So we'll have to see what the courts say in Italy and to see whether this program resumes. Now back to you.
That was Don Arleth coming to us from the city of Shenzhen in Albania. North Korean troops are in Russia to help Putin's army fight against Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte confirmed today. The troops have reportedly been deployed to the Kursk region, where Ukraine controls more than 1,000 square kilometers of Russian land. Marek Steele reports.
This video reportedly shows North Korean troops in Russia. It appeared online less than 2 weeks ago. Now, the Secretary General of NATO has confirmed what Ukraine and some of its allies have been reporting for weeks, that Pyongyang's troops are involved in the Ukraine war.
The deployment of North Korean troops represents, one, a significant escalation in the DPR case ongoing involvement in Russia's illegal war. 2, yet another breach of UN Security Council resolutions.
South Korean intelligence confirmed the reports. Mark Rutte gave his statement only hours after a visit by a South Korean delegation to the NATO headquarters.
These North Koreans are being forced into the war. And so they're bringing them in to fill holes in their own defenses, while at the same point, and it just goes to show you how things are going in Kursk, that they're having to bring them to Kursk because ultimately Kursk is occupied by the Ukrainian Defense Forces.
Ukrainian intelligence said last week that about 12,000 North Korean troops were already in Russia and training was taking place in 5 military bases.
This is so far a minor force that North Korea has sent to Russia, but the symbolic impact should be quite significant because now we have actually 2 nuclear weapon states attacking a non-nuclear weapon state.
As recently as Thursday, Russian lawmakers ratified a pact with North Korea, envisioning mutual military assistance. The agreement obliges both parties to provide military assistance if either is attacked. The North Korean army may not be as handy for President Putin as he would likely want. Although Pyongyang's military has more than 1,300,000 staff, it has no recent combat experience.
No matter what country they're from, if they are engaging us on behalf of the Russian enemy, they are the enemy and they will pay the same price that all of the enemies pay. They can either surrender, they can run and desert the Russians, or they can die.
Despite the evidence, Pyongyang and Moscow have not confirmed the report so far. This is what Russian President Vladimir Putin recently said when asked about images showing North Korean troops in Russia.
Images are a serious thing. If there are images, then they reflect something.
According to Germany's Friedrich Neumann Foundation, the value of North Korean arms supplies to Russia can be estimated at $5 billion. Sending North Korean troops to the country could bring Pyongyang further profits.
And now back to Poland. The race to succeed Andrzej Duda as Poland's president in next year's elections is heating up, with the country's 2 biggest parties set to announce their candidates in the coming weeks. So who's in the running and who could be waiting in the wings? Aaron Daman reports.
Poland's Deputy Prime Minister and leader of junior coalition partner, the Polish People's Party, calling on his government counterparts to find one candidate for next year's presidential election and stick with them.
I will ask the other leaders of the ruling coalition parties to agree to have a single candidate in the election, to do this together.
But not so fast, says Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
The joint strategy of the October 15th coalition for the presidential elections must be built on 3 foundations. To win while maintaining unity. This is our goal.
According to opinion polls, the smaller coalition parties in Tusk's government only hold slim chances in the battle for the presidency. Tusk remains in a much more comfortable position, with 2 candidates that surveys show would have a strong shot at victory. Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski remains a leading name, but another option has also been making the rounds, Poland's chief diplomat and foreign minister Radosław Sikorski, who has been jet-setting across the region and appears to be seeking Tusk's blessing to run. And in a tweet pinned to the top of his X account, Sikorski thanks followers for their support, sharing the results of an Onet poll showing promising public trust. Sources tell TVP World Sikorski wants the top job, but there are mixed views on whether he has a genuine chance. One expert says it will all be down to the data.
Given the numbers, Mr. Sikorski is also a likely candidate.
Whoever secures the Civic Coalition's nomination will face off with the Law and Justice Party, currently represented by incumbent Andrzej Duda, who cannot run again after 2 terms in office. Law and Justice has been on a long road to find a candidate, with leader Jarosław Kaczynski juggling his favourite pick, reportedly considering former head of the National Education Ministry, Przemysław Czarnek, president of the Institute of National Remembrance, Karol Nawrocki, and ex-Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki.
The pressure on the presidential elections are enormous. That election will be make or break for the current government.
When he was re-elected, Prime Minister Donald Tusk promised to clean up Poland, but his efforts have been largely blocked by President Duda. This upcoming election is critical for Tusk if he finally wants to end the tense cohabitation with the presidential palace.
Polish striker Ewa Pajor has been nominated for this year's prestigious Ballon d'Or prize. The award gala will start shortly in Paris, and it will see this year's biggest football stars presented with the legendary Golden Football Prize. Karolina Stoltzman reports.
After 9 successful years in VfL Wolfsburg, Pajor transferred to one of the best female football clubs in the world, FC Barcelona. However, experts remain unsure of whether Pajor's name will grace this year's Ballon d'Or trophy.
Not yet, not this year, maybe next year after the season in Barcelona, when the team will win the Champions League, for example. Eva will be the top scorer.
The day after the Ballon d'Or gala, Pajor will head to Gdańsk, Poland, to lead the Polish national football team in a playoff match against Romania, in an effort to secure a spot in the Euro 2025 tournament.
The women's football in the world is still growing. Also in Poland, but not so fast like in the other part of the world. Polish Football Association, with the host Gdańsk, will try to set up a new record of the publicity in the stadium.
Boosting the popularity of women's football worldwide is also a priority for UEFA.
We hope that with the Women's Euro, that more girls will play football.
Women's football has really seen tremendous growth, I think, because we have created a momentum, a movement in more than just a few countries all over the world with major international tournaments.
Ewa Pajor's various successes could help increase interest in Polish women's football. Another team that has recently sparked the experts' interest is the under-17 Polish national girls football team.
The girls won third place in May in Sweden in the Euro Championship, and now they qualified to the World Cup. First time in history, right? They made history in the Polish women's football.
Regardless of the result today in Paris, Ewa Pajor is well on her way to becoming the internationally recognized face of Polish women's football.
After the weekend parliamentary elections, Georgians are waking up to a new reality of their country possibly falling into Russia's event horizon, as the Georgian Dream Party is deemed to have won the election. Georgia's President Salome Zurabishvili, one of the government's greatest pro-EU advocates, refused to recognize the results and called upon fellow Georgians to protest. Meanwhile, Hungary's Viktor Orban made his way to Tbilisi to congratulate and legitimize the election, which many international politicians refused to accept. Joining me now to discuss this is Alex Crevo-Asatiani, Deputy Director for Foreign Affairs for Georgia's United National Movement. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good evening.
So Georgia, with everything that happened during last weekend's election, is the Western dream beyond recovery? And how far is actually Georgia from the EU accession now?
It's absolutely not beyond recovery. Now, the most important thing is that we, the Georgian people, who already have said that we will now recognize whatever reports the Central Election Commission published on Saturday, as has done the president of Georgia. The most important thing is that we do not stop the momentum that we gained today. Close to 100,000 people protested, which is huge. For a small country like Georgia. Now, the most important thing is that we keep this pressure on the government, which is now illegitimate, going. Why? Because we know that the Western partners of Georgia care a lot about Georgia, but they will only intervene if they see a strong determination by the Georgian people. That's what we saw during the spring protests. America, the European Union, and European individual member states only intervene when they see that the Georgian people are ready to protest and to defend their democracy. That's what we're doing right now.
So there was a joint statement.
Just to respond to your second question about European integration. Right now the most important thing is that we understand that the European Union will not open accession talks under this current Georgian Dream government. They've already made that really clear. But that's okay, because very soon we will change the government. We will have a democratic government elected by the people, and we'll open those accession talks very soon.
So according to a joint statement which was issued and signed by more than a dozen of European and Canadian politicians, be it chairs of parliamentary foreign affairs committees in Germany, Lithuania, Ukraine, Ireland, vote had been neither free nor fair, and against this background the European Union cannot recognize the results. Do you think that at this point the opposition of European and international politicians could actually lead to another parliamentary vote taking place anytime soon?
Yes, absolutely. Because remember that Georgian Dream is a party that cares a lot about its financial standing. Bidzina Ivanishvili, the Russian oligarch, who also happens to be a French citizen, and that's something we need to remember to remind that to Paris, cares a lot about his money. And now the next step that needs to happen is international sanctions, not against the Georgian people, not against the Georgian economy, but against Bidzina Ivanishvili himself and against Georgian Dream leaders. The moment that they see that isolation, they will immediately move to try and change things. What we're calling for right now is a completely new election under international, not observation, administration. The reason why is because we know we've already dealt with the international observation. It's not enough to counter the amount of fraud that we saw, the amount of ballot stuffing, the amount of violence that we saw. That's not something that individual European politicians observing the elections can change. We want full new elections under international administration, and we're confident that if the pressure begins in Brussels and in Washington, we know that Georgian Dream will walk back. It's done that in the past. What's important is to remember that Georgian Dream needs that pressure constantly on its shoulders. Otherwise, it will continue to do the wrong thing and to lie to Europe.
In an alternative reality, if another round of parliamentary votes would not be to take place, are we to expect a similar dynamic between Georgia and Russia as we can see between Russia and Belarus as of now? Do you think that this is the event horizon that I mentioned in the intro before that Georgia could be possibly falling into?
Absolutely. We're talking about an axis of evil that has set up around the world where authoritarian states are becoming more and closer to each other. We're talking about Iran, we're talking about North Korea, China, Russia, Belarus. And yes, Bidzina Ivanishvili's Georgia will absolutely be a full member of that. There's no other way, because Bidzina Ivanishvili is someone that has a lot of financial interests to the Kremlin, and it's just a natural progression for unfortunately for Georgia, unless we manage to defeat them. This is why, and that's extremely important to underline, the Georgian people understands this. It's not like during the spring protests where after that we stopped the protests because we were getting ready for the elections. We know that if right now we don't defeat Georgian Dream, if right now we leave any respite and we decide to regroup or anything, we know that democracy in Georgia will be over for a generation or 2 generations or even more, because there's no walking back from this. This is the ultimate battle for Georgian democracy, and it's not me just saying a hyperbole. The president is saying the same thing. Every opposition party is saying the same thing. Civil society is saying the same thing.
This is truly a terrifying concept. As of 7 p.m. local time in Georgia, there was a massive protest, which we mentioned in our service earlier today, which you mentioned speaking earlier today. If things got heated and there would be a clash between Georgians and the authorities, do you think that Russia would actually try and intervene in any way, shape, or form?
So we don't believe that the situation will ever get as bad as a clash. We will probably see in the coming days some attempts by law enforcement to attack protesters, peaceful protesters with water cannons, etc. But we need to remember that this is a small country. Every Georgian knows each other. Georgians in the special forces know Georgians in the protest ranks, and vice versa. So we don't believe that Georgians will ever take up arms against other Georgians. That's just a very science fiction scenario for us. We don't see it happening and getting that bad. We're confident that because Georgians will be able to, at the end of the day, talk to each other and together get rid of Georgian Dream, we know that it won't give any opening for Russia to intervene. Russia is way too busy, unfortunately, invading Ukraine. Right now it has to take troops from North Korea because it's running out of its own citizens to kill. Right now, the occupied territories of Abkhazia and Skin Valley, the Georgian regions that are occupied by Russia, are seeing their own Russian bases being emptied to take people to redeploy troops to the Ukrainian front. We don't believe that Russia has the actual energy to look at Georgia. This is why right now is an amazing, unique opportunity for the Georgian people to take their future back.
So last but not least, Viktor Orban, he's visiting Georgia to congratulate the leader of the Georgian dream. Is it safe to consider that Orban's visit is a sign of a serious rift within the European Union? Because the Georgian elections go far beyond Georgia. They also will affect, in a way, the European Union.
Absolutely, Viktor Orban is someone who everyone has known is very problematic for European cohesion, for the European determination, especially against Russia. Now what he's done is he's openly endorsing authoritarianism in the European neighborhood. He's openly endorsing the end of democracy in the European neighborhood, and that is a very scary premonition for what might happen inside the European Union if he's allowed to continue. There's only 4 countries in the world that have recognized the legitimacy of these elections, of these so-called elections. We're talking about Hungary, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia. It's very unfortunate. Some countries were a lot more disappointing than others. We're expecting Russia to say that these elections were legitimate because they're counting on Georgian dream for their own interests. We were not expecting Armenia to do that. That's very unfortunate. But Hungary was one of those states that we were expecting would support Georgian dream. We know that Viktor Orban has deep financial ties to Bidzina Ivanishvili's regime. We know that's been going on for quite a few years. And the one good thing is that we also know that Bidzina Ivanishvili is not capable of building himself a network in Western countries bigger than just Viktor Orban and pro-Russian parties.
Alex Krivo-Asatiani.
And another one more thing I want to say is that today was a beautiful scene that we saw at the hotel of Viktor Orban when he was coming out of the hotel. There were hundreds of protesters gathering him and booing him, and that was just a beautiful sight to see.
Thank you so much, Alex Krivo-Asatiani, Deputy Director for Foreign Affairs, United National Movement. Thank you for joining. And so this would be all the latest news for now here on World News Tonight. Please stay tuned here on TVP World as we will be back with more news and features.